Recording.
Cool. Kia ora everyone, welcome. I will get us started with the karakia. Karakia te matanga. Manakitia tene hui, manakitia tene ropu, manakitia tene whānau. Tai noa ki tēnei kaupapa. Arahina nā korero, arahina nā papai, arahina nā ture nei kia puta ai te maramatanga. Amine. Welcome, kia ora koutou. I am Frian Wadia, one of the admins on VIPS Equity in Education, and I have Rebecca Corlett with me here today. Rebecca is one of our other admins on VIPS Equity in Education, and we are delighted to share with you our next Korero around EGL in education with Pip Brunn over here today with us. So as usual, what I will do is, because we often have a mix of old and new people coming along, I will do a tiny short brief summary of EGL, just to introduce everybody to EGL, and then get us going with the Korero with Pip. Okay. Let's do this. Now, here we go. Okay. So we're just going to talk a little bit about embedding, enabling good lives in education, and what does that mean? I know the last 3 days have been really, really hard for the community with some recent announcements. So I do want to reiterate and remind everybody that EGL is actually a social movement. It is led by disabled people and their whānau and Aotearoa, and it is a mechanism for us to shift and make the change happen that we desire. So the intent of EGL is to really shift power, authority, self-determination, and allow for choice and control for disabled people, children, and their families. And it is a fabulous framework to use when we are relationship building with people in the community, people across sectors, professionals, and also it is an equity framework that we can apply into our individual lives. We can apply into the different spaces we work in and interact with, so that disabled children, people and families have better inclusion, better life outcomes, and that their disability rights are upheld. So quickly, the value of EGL, it is led by disabled people and whānau, nothing about us without us. It is based on the social model of disability, which means that it is the barriers that society puts in the way of disabled people that lead to challenges for our disabled people, not the impairments themselves. It is all about mana enhancing experiences for our disabled people, children and families, self-determination, and their voice being front and center. It is aligned with whānau approach, and it is also upholds the rights of disabled people as per the UNCRPD. And the other thing is Te Tiriti o Waitangi is one of the key po that it also upholds. Now, the vision of EGL is that we will have a future where disabled children and adults and their families will have greater choice and control over their supports and lives, and make more use of the natural and universally available supports. Now, the key things here are choice and control. And the other bit is it's not just about supports, it's about our lives. So I just want to remind people, with all the distress that's occurred in the community with recent announcements, there may be challenges with the supports, but in terms of creating our lives, you know, the natural supports, what can we do in our communities? We still have some power there to keep, you know, moving in the right direction and making those positive changes happen for our children and the wider community. So EGL vision and education. I will skip this slide. We've done this before. And I'm just going to quickly run through the EGL principles so we can get on with our Korero with Pip. So the EGL principles, we've got 8 principles. They're quite self-explanatory. We've got self-determination. beginning early, person-centered, ordinary life outcomes, mainstream first, mana enhancing, easy to use, and relationship building. I'll just pick on a couple of them. Self-determination in the context of education means that children, disabled children, and their families have got a say in terms of how they receive education, what supports are needed for their education, and how those supports are utilized. And really making sure that the child's preferences, interests, they're all sort of front and center, and there's space created where, you know, the voices of disabled children and their families can be heard in a respectful manner, and, you know, that collaboration can happen. So it's about giving opportunity for them to be heard. And the other one I want to talk about is mainstream first. Now, mainstream first is about making sure that the option of mainstream is always available if a family so chooses, if a child so chooses, and that is really, really authentically offered, and all our children are welcomed into mainstream education spaces. Person-centered means there is a space for the specialist supports that children need, you know, the individual preferences they might have, all of that. But it's not an either or between mainstream first and person-centered. I always see it as an and. So all the principles, you know, can be applied to different contexts. So I'm going to stop share here. I'm going to bring us back to the mainstream now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spotlight our interpreter and our speaker, just so for the sake of recording, we've got it all right and sorted. Give me a second. And we'll spotlight. Perfect. Here we go. All right. So on to our Korero. Let me introduce you to Pip Brunn here. Pip is a parent. I got to know Pip a few years ago, I think over social media, Facebook, you know, comments and things like that. And then we've had a few conversations as well. We're really lucky to have Pip here. Pip has been part of the EGL journey in the Mid Central, isn't it, Pip, for a long time now. And Pip has also been very active in the early childhood space through the play group. And Pip is a parent to a few fabulous children. And she supported her own daughter, you know, to access and participate in the community using the EGL approach. So Pip, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come along over here and talking to us a little bit about your journey. And yeah, let's get going. So can you do a little bit of an introduction about yourself, your family? Just share with us a little about you and your wonderful whānau. Kia ora.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's actually quite a welcome break from the all the overwhelming conversations that we're having at the moment. So yes, I am a mother of 6, and I have been in playcentre Aotearoa for probably 27 years. And yeah, so I've got 6 daughters. My oldest daughter was diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder when she was 26. My second daughter, Lucy, she has a rare chromosome disorder. There isn't anybody with the same one that she has. She's profoundly deaf and has intellectual challenges, and what I like to refer to as quite a few negative ways to communicate with other people. So she finds positive physical and verbal communication a little bit challenging. Lucy does have quite a significant intellectual disability, and she has you know, autistic spectrum traits and ADHD and all those ones with all those letters. I also have other daughters, Charlotte and Mary and Katie and Elizabeth. Mary has diagnosis of ADHD and generalized anxiety. Katie has ADHD, ASD, and generalized anxiety, which actually was really identified after Katie had a major accident. And I think girls are quite intensely brilliant and amazing at their ability to modify the way that they are for any given environment. But when you have an injury, it's a little impossible to do that. And then I have Elizabeth, and the jury is out on her right now. Two of my daughters work in the disability sector, are having a lot of experience working in their family. Yeah, so that's probably about that. I am married. We've been married for 30 years. I feel very grateful and lucky that I'm still married. Yeah, and lots of animals, because if I get more animals, I won't have more children, but I am going to have a grandbaby. So I'm like super excited. Yeah. So yeah, in the school environment over the years, I have seen the evolution of education through my 6 children. And some of the evolution is to be celebrated, and some of that education evolution has quite a few challenges that are still available. I want to put a resource in the chat box for people to be able to access. The resource is called, I hope I can do it. The resource is called the Good Start in Life Practice Guidance. And I would just really like for people to be able to have access to that particular piece of work to take away with you today. So I have put it in the chat box.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Right. So where would you like to start?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that beautiful, beautiful introduction about your family. I love how, you said with one of your children, you're like, oh, the jury's still out. And I think, when we've been through that journey of, getting a diagnosis, supporting our kids over and over, by the end of it, you go, it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, we'll just get on with the day. And so you're not so worried about the diagnosis. And I remember, Pip, when my second son, Kyan, who is now 16, initially had a diagnosis of, what was it called? Oh, global developmental delay, cause unknown. I was very hung up on the cause unknown. And I was like, I want to know the cause. I want to know the cause. And, as years went by, I thought, why waste time on the cause? Like, we're supporting him, we're doing things. It's about moving forward and looking at what is needed right now, to support him. And so then I just shifted my focus and I let go of the, the cause and finding out the cause. So look, I would love to hear where and how did you begin your journey with EGL? So you've told us a little about your personal life in terms of the family and all the diagnosis and stuff. Where did you begin with your connection, understanding of EGL? Where did that start? When did it start? How did it start? Because I also know that you are part of the family core group in Mid Central and the regional leadership core group. So just for our listeners today, our attendees on Zoom, within the EGL kaupapa, family core groups, disabled people's care core groups, and service provider core groups have been sort of key groups from the community that have come together to look at and explore what a EGL approach in that region might mean. And then, representatives from each of those core groups have gone on to regional leadership groups. And again, that's part of, the EGL framework and structure. And they have then gone on to influence across sectors, influence, the disability system transformation, Whaikaha government, and also connect back with the core groups, and filter information. So I know you've been part of, that space as well. So we would love to hear a little about that journey, Pip, and then if we can move on and talk a little bit about the good start in life, that you shared as well, and your, I guess your experiences in the ECE space and in the education space, because you've obviously supported, I know we've been, in the education advocacy space for many years as well. So yeah, even EC and schools, what's that been like over the years? So yeah, on to you.
Sure. So I started on this journey in about 2017. Somebody rang me up and she said, "Oh, I reckon you should go to this meeting. It's probably going to be really good for your whānau." And I was like, "Okay, I'll go to this meeting." And because my daughter's older now, and she was older on the time, I was really skeptical about whatever was going to happen next, because really nothing could be any worse than what we already were putting up with. So really, if we were going to get anything better, I probably needed to know about that. So I went along to the meeting. At the time, I was facilitating providing professional development under the revised version of Te Whāriki. So I was working in other early childhood services, supporting them to
Can I just jump in? So
yeah.
just for our listeners, Te Whāriki is the early childhood education curriculum here
It
in
is.
Aotearoa. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the early
Yeah.
childhood curriculum, which has a crossover into the New Zealand education schools curriculum. So that's what I was doing at the time. So I went to the meeting, got to meet some amazing people from the National EGL group, of which you weren't there at that particular time, and heard about enabling good lives. And really, for me, what stood out for me was, what does this mean in the context of everyday life? And that was the message that Enabling Good Lives shared with us, is that how can we shift the change from the perspective for disabled people and about disabled people and the way that disabled people experience life. And so for me, that was it. It was not about what different funding I could access or wanting more or less. It was actually about how my children and my family could interact with the world outside. And I know, as a parent, that actually interacting with the world outside is very isolating, and often we choose not to. So for me, it was like a set of empowerment, that no longer did I have to feel grateful to exist or participate in the world. That's how that was what it was for me. It really gave me the standing point that actually my child and my children deserved to be here just as much as anybody else, and they had a right to have their needs met, and they had a right to be valued for what they can contribute. And that was it for me, because that's what I had been searching for. I'd been searching for years.
Yeah.
My daughter Lucy, when she was 7, was told by the itinerant teacher of the deaf that she had absolutely no capacity for learning. That teacher was never allowed to come anywhere near my daughter ever again. Lucy is now 25. She got cochlear implants when she was 16, and she is 25 and learning new words every day. So don't ever let anyone tell you that stuff. When she was 14, I was told that if she hadn't learned this particular skill by the time she was 14, she's never going to, so why bother? Again, I'm not really very good at being told no. And so, yeah, that's good. Luckily, I had the principals around me at the time where I could go, well, later on, where I could go, well, hang on a minute. That doesn't really sound very mana enhancing to me. How can we shift this perspective a little bit? Because that's my daughter you're talking about. So I remember when she first started school, the contraption that she was trapped in just so she would sit in the classroom, that would be pretty much illegal now.
Wow.
So and so these are the constant fights that from the early education space for my daughter to actually realizing at the age of 20 that she actually didn't really need to stay there till she was 21. It really was just a waiting room to go into whatever black hole was going to happen after school, which is actually what we're still experiencing, a black hole of what happens when you go to school.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I am at. And my other daughters who do have autistic spectrum disorder and ADHD, sometimes being girls, the way that presents in the world is quite different to what it does for boys. These were very highly intelligent girls that would get 100% on PAT scores, but couldn't actually produce what I would say logical schoolwork. And so by the time they reached the college age, their interest in school had pretty much become null and void, because children previously, in my 28, the older ones, I had 3 under 5. I don't really recommend that, to be fair. The older ones in their education life were not learning for themselves. They were learning for somebody else. They were learning to please what is acceptable to other people. As the children got older and my younger children came through school, the one thing that I felt was really good for them was them being able to be engaged in their learning in a way that to make learning not excitable, it's just actually interesting to them. So that's in but unfortunately there's still so much disparity and disconnect between primary school, intermediate school and college, and how that occurs.
Pip, one of the things you said to me really sort of stood out. What stood out to me was that person-centered principle, in terms of education becoming more person-centered now, because it looks at how do we engage these individual children, and that doesn't happen everywhere, unfortunately. I know it doesn't, but when you've got teachers who are really good at what they do, when you've got schools or ECs who are really good and proactive at wanting to engage children and do the best for their learning, I think it does come down to really that person-centered approach to teaching and learning, isn't it? How do we engage using their interest? How do we engage our children using their skills, their abilities? And what I found was when the person-centered approach was taken in the education space, the learning and the experiences were mana enhancing for my children. But if you took away from the person-centeredness and if you expected them to fit into certain boxes or do things in a certain way only, learn while you sit, quietly, and sort of really rigidly in one place, and that doesn't work for all our kids, right? So then those experiences are stressful, they are traumatic, they actually lead to educational trauma for a lot of our kids. So I love how you've said, that when your kids later on sort of could experience that person-centered engagement and learning, it was a much better experience for them. The other thing, Pip, can I ask you quickly, in terms of those conversations, because you mentioned you've had conversations where you've gone back and asked, this is not mana enhancing, and one of the things I talk in some of the workshops I deliver is I talk about partnership. I talk about how it's so important for us as families to build partnership with the schools and keep our children front and center and allow opportunities for our children's voices to be heard, right? And for their preferences, their sort of interests in ways of learning to be focused on. So how have you done that? I know you're a very, very passionate advocate for your kids, you're vocal. Tell me, how have you gone about building those relationships and shifting perspectives in the education space for your children? Because I know that's not easy.
No, and look, I think that comes first. You cannot do the work if you do not have a relationship. We know that. We already know that that's human nature. You can't just jump in and do the work if you don't know that person. So, and as parents, we're often relying on professionals to be able to guide us and tell us the things that we need to know so that we can progress our children further. So we're relying on these people to guide us when actual fact we know our children the best. and sometimes some of that guidance is really misconstrued or not appropriate for the actual child that they're trying to guide you on. So that relationship that you have with your school and your child's teacher is literally comes first. It must come first. I remember a time in intermediate when my daughter would be find it very overwhelming in the classroom because the teacher yelled all the time, the children are grouchy, and she was just, and because, you know, we have a level of anxiety here, you know, it feels like that you're the person being yelled at and you're the, you know, and you're doing something wrong. And so you can't learn when your cortisol levels are raised to the roof. You can't do that. It's impossible. You can't absorb learning when that is happening. So really what happened was I had a discussion with her teacher, with Mary there. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say her name, but with my daughter there, and said, look, this is how she's feeling. Is there anything that she's doing in the classroom that that she could be improving to help this? But you know, you really can't be you know, we're our children's role models. If you're going to yell at my child, you're actually telling them that it's okay for them to yell at someone else. So what can, you know, how can we sort of manage this relationship? And really it did get better for her. It got better because I had a relationship with the teacher. We had a to and fro conversation. And I didn't go in there guns blazing to say you're doing a bad job at teaching my child because you kept yelling at them. I really took it on, this is my child. These are the things that she is struggling with in your classroom. And you know, these are the, you know, I didn't tell her that it was her that was doing anything wrong. I was saying the noise in the classroom and you know, you telling people off, and which are probably, you know, sometimes it's valid, but the way in which she was doing it was actually harming my child in her classroom. So that whole thing was really about, you know, I remember being at school and the dictatorship that it was at school, and how scared I was of teachers and how scared I was of adults in general. And, you know, I really wanted to try and change that for my children so that they could have a better experience than me. And, you know, I'd like to say for the most part, they probably have had a better experience, but that's because I've been open with their teachers and made sure that to and fro relationship was happening. And, you know, often we say our children, you know, especially ones that might have some behavior, you know, what's perceived by other people as behavior issues. I always think about that as how are we modifying our environment and the way that we are engaging with our children so they want to be with us, as opposed to making them feel like they have to be with us and do what we tell them to do. So I will always talk about that when a parent and a teacher are struggling with this engagement. I would be thinking about what is it in the classroom environment that makes that child not want to be there. How are you modifying the routine of the day to be able to get the best out of this child? If you've got a child with sensory needs, there are specific things that those children need during the day to support them to engage in the learning. How are we making space for that? How are we doing that? Those, you know, there's that sort of stuff. Yeah, so I think that I really can't stress that enough, that it's that relationship, but also the perception that parents feel like that that the professionals have all the power. And that's where enabling good lives is important, because if we can use the principles of enabling good lives in the context of our life and how we feel as parents and how we want to engage with the rest of the world, we have the ability to sort of consistently refer to that when we're having conversations with teachers. Not only are they ours, they have a responsibility to engage with that. And you can make it sort of a little bit more consistent. Yeah.
But you've given some real good nuggets there, in terms of what parents can do and how they can build those relationships and advocate for their children, right? And I love what you said about you didn't just go in guns blazing, because that's what I used to do when I first started out my journey. I would go in guns blazing, and I would really expect people to just get on board because I had stated my children's rights, or I had said, what my children needed. And I learned pretty soon that it was important to build relationship. It was important to make others feel safe and others feel like there was a space for collaboration, and then we could get those conversations going about what my children's needs were, and how things could be shifted in the environment, or by the adults that were doing the teaching and learning with my kids. So I love how you've pointed that out. That is really, really important. And the other thing
But wait, there's one thing on that, Freyan, is that as parents, we're emotionally connected to our children. So we are going to be emotional, and it is going to be difficult for us to regulate those responses. And so I would call on professionals to actually respond to that. Because often what happens is when we become confrontational and we get upset because we're not actually being heard, is that actually we lose the ability to have that relationship. And I believe that it's the professional's responsibility to make those people feel safe. And so it really comes from there first. It comes from there first. If we continue to be downtrodden by the powers that be, we're not going to get anywhere. So we really need to rely on the responsibility of the workforce and the environment to actually shift their perspective and the way that they're engaging with parents and children when it comes to this, because we're really not going to get anywhere.
Absolutely agree. And I think without creating a space for voices to be heard, and I mean our children's voices, our family voices, we can't have those conversations, can we? Because we're trying to push something, and the school or educators are sort of trying to defend their way of doing things. And this is really a fundamental shift, isn't it? Even in wider education space, the way education was, like you say, back in our days where everything, you followed a textbook or you did things in a certain way. Everybody did things in a certain way. Whereas now there is more awareness that actually people are different. People are unique. We learn in different ways. We do things in different ways. So my next question to you is, can you share with us a little bit about the Good Start in Life piece of work? Because again, that's linked to the EGL principles, and it is all about beginning early, one of the EGL principles. So beginning early is, in my opinion, it's not just about beginning early in the age sort of aspect. It is also about beginning early as soon as needs are identified in the wider context for disabled children, people, and families. But I know in the education space, this was a particular piece of work done to make sure that our kids and families have the right start and begin on the right foot, so to speak. One of the things as a parent I missed out was when my children were diagnosed, we weren't introduced to anything like the UNCRPD, our children's rights. And so I started off our journey with a very deficit-based sort of model of disability, where you were pitied, you were sort of less than if you had a disability, and it was just looked through that negative lens of this is going to be challenging for you. And the reality is I've learned so much with my kids. I've grown so much with my kids, and my children teach me every day. They learn, they amaze me in terms of how well they sort of, overcome the challenges, how well they problem solve and navigate life, when they are restricted in a certain skill or a certain ability. So, so I really am passionate about parents having the right start in life, having the right information, especially, you know, the strengths-based approach and a rights-based approach to their children, so they can advocate for their children's rights and uphold their children's rights. So on to you. Tell us a bit about the Good Start in Life piece of work, and how did you get involved into it?
Well, you know, that was quite a long journey. Before the practice guidance was developed, there was a whole lot of consultation and work with the community, not just with parents, but also professionals and, you know, from New Zealand and from overseas. So it wasn't just a New Zealand thing. I came onto the reference group for the Good Start in Life practice guidance sort of in the middle of it when I joined and through the education line in the EGL leadership group. They asked me to come and participate because I'd spent quite a lot of time with the education with education officials trying to figure out how we could shift things from education into the enabling good lives approach way, and that wasn't at all successful, but at least it was a start. So really, you know, the aim of the Good Start in Life practice guidance is to have some kind of consistent support for schools, agencies, early childhood services, any person that is working with someone that might need some extra support. And so like I felt that was a really good thing to have. However, what happened is the document itself just got stuck on some website and nobody really did anything about it. It didn't belong to anybody in particular, and so nobody took any responsibility for socializing said document. So I talk about it quite a lot because you know, it's a really simple, easy to read, easy to use, sort of consistent guide for people working in this space. And you know, we're talking about the strengths-based model and talking about the relationships with parents and how to you know, support parents to feel good about their children and you know, and also the perspective that professionals might have about other people and other people's children, and ensuring that the information that they're giving people is it's really hard to say correct, because sometimes when you think you're giving correct information, it could be correct for someone but not correct for somebody else.
It's all about being appropriate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being appropriate for the individual and the context and the, you know, the space in which sort of, you know, you're engaging and interacting with someone.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, you know, we have this really heavy history when it comes to education and what is considered the norm of what you might do in the education space. And the whole purpose of what we're trying to do is to shift that and to change that. So the Good Start in Life practice guidance is empowering for the people that need to use it. You know, potentially, you know, Lucy, my daughter Lucy, could have ended up in residential care. She could have ended up in a special school. She could have. She, you know, actually when she started school, she was in a segregated unit at primary school because it looked like a safe place for her to be. Considering this child quite likes to pick up stones from the middle of the road, that was probably made me feel safe. But the you know, the guidance sort of helps you think about different ways that can happen, and helps you sort of visualize or view or work with and be connected to the people that you need to help you sort of choose the trajectory that you want to send your child in, or you want to go in yourself, I suppose. Yeah, so, you know, I know now that Lucy is 25. I know now if I had something like Enabling Good Lives or in the practice guidance when she had started school, I would have done a whole lot of things differently. And one of those would have been never, ever to keep her at school away from her peers. Because what happens in primary school you form relationships with children in primary school, then they go off to intermediate and you stay at primary school, and those relationships, they get lost. And then you go off into college, and no longer is it cool to hang out with the special needs kid anymore, and so your social circle becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until you do not have a social circle at all. And so that's been my experience, and I like to share that with people, because we feel like it's safe to segregate our children because we think that they're safe. But instead of segregating our children, why not actually give them the support that they need so that they can be visible in the community and participate in the community, and it be a responsive, reciprocal environment. And someone said to me once, my child's participation should not be at the expense of somebody else's success. And I call absolute codswallop on that. So, okay, good.
Well, look, I love what you're talking about, because this doesn't get talked about. You talked about what is correct, what is appropriate. And I think there's so many versions. So for me, it's been inclusive education, right since my kids were little. We've had lots of ups and downs. And, my oldest son actually has ended up in special school over the years, not because we didn't try, we tried hard enough. But I can see the difference between the special school, the communication, connection with the community, participation in the community, and the same thing in a mainstream space. It may not be perfect, but it's a lot better. My standard, so I call it the gold standard of the definition for inclusive education, and that is the general comment on the UNCRPD Article 24 about inclusive education, and it talks really clearly. I strongly urge parents to have a read. It's a long document, but it's fabulous. It talks about what inclusive education is. It talks about the benefits, actually, like you say. Inclusive education for our children does not mean somebody else is suffering. It does not take away from anybody. It actually adds to their experiences and their educational outcomes. So there's research that actually shows, how inclusive education benefits not only the disabled child or person in the long term, with life outcomes, but also for other children who are around them. They're much better for being educated in that inclusive setting. So thank you for sharing. That is really, really useful. And I share your sentiment. I don't know why that document around a good start in life is not being used more. So I was actually part of some of that, the early interviews with the community and, sort of engagement that was done back in the day. And I thought it was a fabulous document when it came out, but it never got used, like you say. It never got used. So if there are any EC teachers, even classroom teachers, schools, educators here today on our Zoom Korero, please do start using that document. It is really, really valuable, and it really allows us to unpack sort of the EGL approach, really, isn't it? And look at what does this mean in practice in the education space, or as a professional, if you're interacting with a family, even in other spaces, could be health or social work or anything like that. So thank you, Pip. It's been really, really useful, valuable listening from you. Now we've got 15 minutes. We want to leave a little bit of time to have some questions from attendees today, but can you quickly, just quick 2 minutes sort of wrap up for us in terms of your role and engagement in the core group, the family core group, and the regional leadership group? What's that been like, because I know the whole people, we keep talking about EGL and principles, and we talk about vision and everything, but on the ground, what does it mean in the community, as somebody who's been involved in the core group space and regional leadership group space? Can you just share a little bit?
Kia ora, Fran. Well, I would love to say that it's really helps us connect to the community, but actually as parents, we're already knackered. So it's tricky. For us in our region, we have a Facebook page that we have Korero on and talk about. We talk about different topics that are happening for us, and we share. So we share that with each other, and then we sort of share that in the leadership group. I believe that really our community is still disconnected. I feel like that we, when it came to the creation of Mana Whai Kaha, that still the community was not educated enough to understand how to implement the Enabling Good Lives approach in their own lives. And still to this day, it has still felt that it's been very centered on systems transformation, when really what we should be doing is that we should be thinking about, what does this really mean in the context of our everyday lives? And so, we have conversations about that, but because it's really hard to think about that, and it's really hard to have vision when you're struggling to survive every single day because your needs are not being met, and because your child's needs are not being met, and the siblings' needs are not being met. It's hard to do that, but we try. So that's good. I mean, obviously in the environment that we're in now, the core groups in our region will mobilize, and we will get together, and we will have some kind of community forum probably next week. I'm not organizing it, I hope. And we will hear the voice of the community, and we will take their voice, and we will share it. We will put something together, and it'll go somewhere, and probably sit in somebody's office along with all of the other letters that the ministry have seen. So that's it. I am on the leadership group, and from the leadership group, we actually do have a governance group. So I'm the deputy chair of the Mana Whai Kaha governance group, which is supposed to provide strategic advice and guidance on the vision of Mana Whai Kaha and the direction of enabling good lives. It doesn't have anything to do with operations at all. It's just actually about providing support to Mana Whai Kaha to support the vision moving forward.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sort of to help have those conversations. And then there's that. So that's what I do.
Look, thank you so much for sharing that. What my biggest takeaway from this is, it is about community voice. It is about community voice, and it is about community voice reaching different corners, different sectors, different spaces, to shape things so that they are actually working for the community. So thank you for sharing. Look, we'll do a few questions quickly. We've got a few minutes, another 10-12 minutes, so let's go to questions. We've got a hand up. Kia ora, Jade, welcome. I love how your hand is up, ready to go.
Yeah, kia ora. Kia ora koutou. My name is Jade Farrer, and I'm the chair of the National Enabling Good Lives Leadership Group. It's great to be here with you this afternoon. I recognize some of the names in the room today, so thank you for all the support of the National Leadership Group over the last few days. My question for Pip, well, I'll say something first and then my question. I've since discovered that you're somewhat of a TikTok celebrity. We'll talk about that a bit later. But my question for you is a little bit of a departure from probably the theme of this conversation, but can you please give some insight to the group as to how these funding changes are potentially going to change the way that your family operate? And can you make that real for us, please?
Oh, gee, I don't know where to start, to be honest. So, all right, well, oh, Jade, what a question. Oh, thanks a lot. Well, I just feel that for our family in particular, it will strip away any ability for us to be able to do things outside the square, because I know for my family, trying to get support workers to support my daughter at home is actually impossible. We have one support worker who happens to be a dancer, and we've employed her because she's a dancer and Lucy likes to dance. And but she only works like 10 hours a week, and there's 168 hours in a week. So it's, you know, it's really going to make it difficult for her to be able to, yeah, look, I mean, support workers are a dime a dozen, to be honest. Like, there's hardly any, or ones that are able to do what is really needed to do for Lucy, and mainly that's around positive communication, because so I'm so overwhelmed with the stress of all of it. But like, if I can't get someone to take care of Lucy to do, I mean, luckily today she's having a bit of a rest day, which is quite nice for me. But you know, she's somebody that can't be left by herself. So here is an example. I purchased, with my personal budget, security cameras for my house so I could leave her at home to go and do something for a short period of time and know that somebody was going to keep an eye on her. Lucy sleeps very little, but sometimes when she sleeps, it's really at stupid times. I don't want to pay a support worker $25 to $30 an hour. Actually, the top cost of like for you know, like I think it's $36 an hour, which is the whole cost, and then you pay the staff. That's how much gets paid under individualized funding. I don't want to pay that much money out for someone to sit on their butt while she's still sleeping. I don't want to do that. That's a waste of money. I don't want to go away for a break and leave her home. What is that telling her about the value that she is in our family? That means that it's okay to take everybody else out for a holiday, but she's not allowed to come. That's not okay. I'm not doing that. So we won't have a holiday because I'm not leaving her behind. You know, so access to healthcare. Lucy has got a problem with her eyes, and she's had 3 operations on her eye. I would use her personal budget to pay to see a private specialist so she can get the operation on her eye, so that which is, you know, we do have like insurance just for like operations, that's all. But to get her to see the specialist costs like a lot of money, not heaps and heaps, but enough that isn't just in your back pocket. So I would use the personal budget to pay for the specialist to check up on her eye, figure out all the other stuff, and then she would be able to have an operation on her eye. Technically, we're not really allowed to do that anymore. And I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to do that, because the appointment's today and I've still got some grace time. So I'm still doing that one. So, you know, these are some of the things. Physical therapy, being able to go to the gym. Like, I go to the gym, I have 4 hours of break a week, 4 hours a week. And I use that to go to the gym because I've been really, really unwell. And the gym makes me feel better, but I won't be able to use my personal budget to do that anymore, which actually is stupid, because it only costs it costs less than a day of respite, to be honest. So what? Yeah. Okay. Is that enough? Can I not talk about that anymore?
No, look, that's all good, Pip. Thank you for sharing. We've got a couple of other questions in the chat. So I'm just going to quickly take those. So the question 1 is, EGL is available in Christchurch and the Waikato at the moment. When will it start being rolled out in other regions? Amanda,
I am going to butt in on this one, actually, Brian.
Go for it, Jay.
I know you're the facilitator, and I don't mean to be rude, but I am going to butt in, because I think when we were asking questions like this, we are confusing what is EGL and what is system transformation. So for whatever reason, the government has decided to pause system transformation for who knows how long for now. The EGL approach is something the government has signed up to and has committed to. Outside of that, they are also signatories to the UNCRPD. So there's no getting out of being responsive, being accessible. Yeah, there's no getting out of that. The government has to deliver solutions around that, but for the time being, they have paused system transformation, as I understand it, in all regions. Freya.
Can I just
Yeah,
respond?
go ahead.
Because what I want to say is that the Enabling Good Lives approach is available to every single person in Aotearoa.
Yeah.
Because it's an approach, it's a different way of living, it's a different way of thinking. It is not a systems transformation. But everybody is responsible for it, and everybody has it available to them. It's not about the money, it's about the way that we live our lives and the way that we engage in society and the way that society engages with us. So I really beg you all to really think about it in that context, because we need our family members and our parents and our disabled people to take that power and use it. And we can use it consistently by being empowered with the understanding of what the Enabling Good Lives approach means.
Absolutely. Jade and Pip, thank you for those answers, because you are making my job a lot easier. So thank you. My sort of only bit to add to that is, when you make decisions in your life while you're engaging with disabled people, while you're engaging with, professionals or even community members, family, friends, in any space where your own disabled child is sort of there as well, make sure you apply those EGL principles, the decisions you make, the choices you make, the language you use. So yeah, the EGL approach is here. It's not going anywhere. It's community-led, and the system transformation, unfortunately, is the government's response to the EGL approach, and we will have to just keep advocating for it and pushing that along. We've got another question that says, how would you suggest you go about introducing EGL to your child's school if they've never heard about it before? Where would you start? Pip, did you want to answer that?
Well, you could print off the Good Start in Life practice guidance and start there. That would be great. And look, I would be sharing the website. All of the information is on the National EGL website, and I really hope it's nice and up to date, Jade. And just really start the conversation. And if you know somebody in your community or have somebody in your community, get them to support you, get them to help you. I have been to schools, I have been and talked to parents. I'm happy to do that. Organize something like this in a Zoom. If you want to start the conversation and they're open to it, then do something like this. If you can't actually access the people face to face, but start with that. Start with the website, start with the Good Start in Life practice guidance. And I encourage you to really look at it carefully for yourself and understand what it means to you as a person before you take it to them, because you're the one with the power.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other things I would add is, these forums are open to everybody. So invite people along so that they're hearing different perspectives. I took a while to understand EGL and apply it to my life. But as I started talking to other people, other parents, other disabled people, my understanding of EGL kept growing. So it still grows to this day. And, it is something you have to practice to then really be able to share it with others. The other thing is, if you've got IEPs or meetings happening with your school for any reason, use that as an opportunity to, before the meeting say, hey, FYI, here's the EGL principles, as a family, we really subscribe to them. I just wanted to share it with you guys, and at the meeting, then you can start using the language, you can start actually talking about, using them for decision-making and things like that. So there's lots of ways in which you can get started. And there is a position statement around EGL and education on the NEGL, the EGL website on the NEGL tab. So that's available as well. Right, let's see. Any other questions? Oh, we're actually out of time. Sorry, let me just quickly run through. Is there anything else? So there's a comment from Christina. It says, I supported a young autistic woman in a meeting with NAS recently. And when I spoke about the principles of EGL and using that approach, I was told we don't have that here yet. Yes, Christina, we've got to start advocating. We've got to start educating others and not allowing for those sorts of excuses. All NAS providers, they've got it in their contracts now that they need to actually be upholding, the EGL approach. So there is a requirement for that. All right. Look, I have really run out of time. There's a question for, can you share the link of the EGL in education? Oh yeah. We can share that. I will actually post it on our VIPS information page alongside this recording. So this recording will go up on a VIPS Equity in Education info page, and in the comments I will post those links.
Right.
So you've got that. Okay. Anything else? Let me see. Anything urgent? Jade, you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Don't you be asking about the TikTok? I was in a mood.
Oh no, that's okay. Love what you're doing and would like some advice on how to get famous, actually. But what I wanted to plug, Freon, was the Enabling Good Lives Facebook page. So this will be a primary communication source for the National Leadership Group as we move through these changes happening at Whaikaha. We would love you to refer families to that page so they can be involved in the conversation, so they can provide advice to the NEGL in terms of how we engage with senior officials and ministers. I have reason to believe that the Enabling Good Lives Facebook page is being what they call shadow banned by the Facebook algorithm. There's some suggestions that Facebook finds disability content offensive. So anything we can do to direct families directly to it would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do, quickly wrap us up with a karakia stop recording. And if people can just hold on, I will put the links in the chat as well. So, karakia whakamutunga. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai. Haumie hui e taikie. Well, everyone, thank you for coming along. And we will post the link as soon as we can. Thank you.
I put my email address in there if anybody wanted it too.
Perfect, Pip. Thank you for that.